and take a look at table 16-5. And you'll see this throughout ebook as we look at a lot of these remaining chapters. Everyone find table 16-5? That basically is an audit program. Now it's specialized for a certain area of the sales and collection cycle. And normally there would be, as you saw in the course projects that I distributed, there'd be 2 more columns that would go to the right of this table, where you have down the preparer's initials and signature, and also on what audit paper these would be shown. But they have 1 through 15. Now, some of these relate to the audit objectives, and the reason this textbook has the audit objectives, you know, like existence, completeness, cutoff, etc., is to try and help you train yourself to come up with audit procedures. So use this as an example here. You know, and there's other examples in the other chapters as well here, because you probably haven't seen an audit program. Maybe Barry to some degree, because he has more background than a lot of the rest of you, but most of you probably otherwise are less familiar. As I said, there's other audit programs. For example, on page 517, this relates to acquisition and payments. They have an audit program there in figure 15-9. That's chapter 15. Now that is one of the chapters that I'm not requiring you to do the homework, but there is an audit program in there. Figure 15-9, page 517. So take advantage of when you see these audit programs so you become more familiar with them, since you're probably not familiar with them from not having worked with the auditors on a major financial statement
this is
audit.
how it should be set up in our report.
Very similar, but then again, look at the sample ones that also have the extra columns.
Okay, so 16.5 and what other ones? 15.9?
15.9. So page
15.9, did I say?
Yeah.
I got another one for you too coming up. I should have written all those all down. Well, you'll have them in your notes. Also on page 462, page 462, figure 14-6, figure 14-6. So we're going to see that pretty much from now on. But we weren't really ready for that until we got all this background information in. So there's an audit. They have this Hillsburg hardware. There's an audit program for test of control and substantive test of transaction. So there's others. I just happen to open up a few pages there that'll give you some guidance here. But notice the volume of material we're going over in here. Yes?
For Dropbox?
No.
This is for the course project.
No, this is not for the drop. This is to guide you on what an audit program is, so when you do the course project, you'll be set.
So you basically talk about the step, you state the step, and then you talk about the details of doing that step.
Yes. Now you'll just be putting the steps down, but in reality, then it would go to a member of the audit team, and they would have to perform that step, sign off on it, indicate the work paper.
But for the project, we're talking about, for our course project.
Yes.
We're going to basically put down the steps and then talk about what we're doing for those steps?
You'll basically just put down the steps.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We just need the
Yes,
steps.
the steps.
Steps
Okay.
only. Okay.
Yeah, but the steps should give enough information for someone to do it. Can you give me those with the figures I just gave? Someone had that, because I'm going to write it down.
16, page 462, figures 14.6.
Page 462.
Mm-hmm.
That is what figure?
14.6.
14.6.
Page
Okay.
517.
517.
Figure 15.9.
15.9.
And the last page is 541, table 6.5, I believe.
Thank you.
16.5.
Yep.
Page table 6-5?
16.
16-5,
I'm
sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I just was flicking through the text and they happened to come to me, but they may not come to me that quickly next time, so now it's nice to have written down. And there's others in here too. Okay, let's go right to the problems then. Okay, I want to get through this chapter, 1327. So again, now that we're going into these would be candidates for what? The Dropbox.
Oh, okay, so
Okay.
what page is that? I'm sorry, because I came out.
Okay, we got 13. Do not put 12 in the Dropbox. Do not put 12. Now we're going over problems in 13. We'll definitely get through this. If we get a little more done, that'd be even better. So these problems that we're going over now for the Dropbox, and it's starting with 13-27. 13-27. Page 432, 432, 433. 432, 433. Looks like we have some internal controls in the acquisition and payment cycle. I don't think we're going to see that cycle to week 7, if I recall. I think it's in week 7. Yeah, so this is an advanced preview. Okay, and then we're supposed to, Part A, what's the transaction-related audit objective? That's not as important to me, but I'll give it to you. What's a test of control you could do in order to check the effectiveness? And what's a substantive test to determine whether financial misstatements are actually taking place? So Part B is a control test, Part C is a substantive test. So I have a feeling this is the last chapter we're going to get to, but we'll be a little less behind. We'll only be behind one. And we already did do a lot of payroll stuff today with Letitia. And you'll be here next week too,
yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we need more expertise, we've got it there. So
we're not doing internal controls?
Yes, we're going to do that too, but I'll give that part. I'd like you to assist me on the other part. So there's only 5 of these, so it's not bad. Number 1. At the end of each month, an accounting clerk accounts for all pre-numbered receiving reports issued during the month and traces each one, this is a good control, to the related vendor's invoice and the acquisition journal entry. The clerk's tests do not include testing the quantity or description of the merchandise received. Okay, for Part A, completeness. Now, what do you think is the test of control?
Looking at the journal entry?
And the numerical sequence of receiving reports, yes. Account for the numerical sequence of receiving reports, account for the numerical sequence of receiving reports, and as Lena said, trace to the acquisition journal entry. Account for the numerical sequence of receiving report and trace to the acquisition journal entry. Now, I want to say something here. Bill, isn't that what they're doing internally? Yes. When you're doing test of control, compliance tests as they call them, what you do is what the company does internally, but you do it on a sample basis. And you look to see if there are exceptions. That's Part B. For Part C, ready for C? Okay. Reconcile the vendor statements to the account payable listing. Reconcile the vendor statements to the account payable listing. Why are vendor statements so valuable? Remember when we talked about reliability of evidence? Why are vendor statements?
Because it's an external?
That's right, it's an external document, exactly. Letitia's right. Comes from an outside third party. Okay, everyone set on that one? Okay, I thought that was kind of nice, that one. Number 2, the cash disbursements clerk is prohibited from handling cash. The bank account is reconciled by another person, even though he has or she has sufficient expertise and time to do it. Okay, for Part A, completeness occurrence, which I always call existence, but completeness, occurrence, and accuracy. Completeness, occurrence, or if you put existence, that's fine with me, and accuracy. Now, don't laugh at B. Observe cash handling procedures. Observe cash handling procedures. And examine who prepares the bank reconciliation. Observe cash handling procedures and examine who prepares the bank reconciliation. So basically, you're making sure that the internal control is carried out. You watch, you observe to see what's occurring. You make certain who's preparing the bank reconciliation. And the substantive test for C, perform test of the bank reconciliation. You perform test of the bank reconciliation, which to me is you audit the bank reconciliation, which is what we did in an old CPA question that we talked about a few minutes ago. Everyone with me? Okay. All right, number 3. Before a check is prepared to pay for acquisitions in the account payable department, the related purchase order and receiving report are attached to the vendor's invoice being paid. A clerk compares the quantity on the invoice with the receiving report and purchase order, compares the price with the purchase order, recomputes, you don't really have to do that math accuracy anyway, and examines the account number indicated on the invoice to determine if it's properly classified. Or we're going to have another objective. Okay. He indicates his performance of these procedures by initialing off on the invoice. All right. Well, we have, again, 3 objectives for Part A. I'll give 2. You give me the third one. Occurrence, or existence. Occurrence, accuracy, and
Completeness.
no. Let me read again. And indicates on the invoice to determine whether it's correctly classified. Classification. You forgot the other objective. Classification. That's why I try to put emphasis on that word, but we haven't seen that in a while, have we? So occurrence or existence, if you prefer the other terminology, or validity is another term for that, accuracy and classification. Now to test the control procedure, they want you just to make sure that every invoice has the initials. Every invoice has the initials. But for the substantive test, recheck a sample of supporting invoices. Recheck a sample of supporting invoices and do what the clerk would have done. Do what the clerk would have done. Let you stop a second, then I want to comment on that.
Is this for B or C? I'm sorry.
That's for C, but I want to follow up, Letitia.
Okay.
That's the official answers, basically. But when you're testing the control, you could say C was also the answer to B. Because remember I said what you want to do on a sample basis, what they did, and look for exceptions. So B, C really overlap there, don't they? One is they're saying look for the initials. But then I'm saying redo what the clerk would have done on a sample basis, which is not just a substantive test, isn't that also a test of control? So you probably could put B-C combination there. Everyone see what I'm getting at? I'm differing a little from the text, I guess.
Can you repeat?
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat?
B and C is examine the invoices for the initials that a review occurred and recheck a sample of invoices as an auditor and do what the clerk would have done. And do what the clerk would have done. But I'm saying there, and I think Letitia pointed this out, that B and C really overlap here. Because rechecking on a sample basis what the clerk did is also a compliance test. So according to them, look at the initials. That's the compliance test. And the substantive test is recheck some invoices and do what the clerk would have done, look for exceptions. But to me, those really blend together. Okay. All right, 4. Are you set? Okay. Before a check is signed by the controller, she examines the supporting documentation accompanying the check. At that time, she initials each vendor's invoice to indicate her approval. Now, this is going to be similar to the one we just did, with Bill differing a little from the book.
Accuracy?
No, not on A, occurrence. They have occurrence on A. But the B, C again, I think B and C should be combined for number 4. They want for B, examine the invoices for the controller's initials. Examine the invoices for the controller's initial. And for C, what would they have for C?
Check to see if it's supporting document.
That's right. Recheck a sample of the invoices and basically do what the controller did. And I say again, in number 3 and number 4, those really, B and C, go together. They're both very similar in nature. There's one with us still. Okay. Number 5. After the controller signs the check, her secretary, isn't that an outdated word like stewardess? Okay, anyway. Her secretary writes the check number and the date the check was issued on each of the supporting documents to prevent their reuse. Occurrence for A. B is examine invoices for check number and date. Examine invoices for check number and date. And C, examine invoices, purchase orders, examine invoices, purchase orders, and receiving reports. Invoices, purchase order, and receiving reports. Looking for proper check number and date. Looking for proper check number and date. Proper check number and date for each cash disbursement. Tell me if you need me to repeat that, because then I want to comment again.
Just last one. For each check?
For each cash disbursement, okay. Examine invoices, purchase order, and receiving reports for proper check number and date for each cash disbursement. But then again, aren't those similar? Isn't that B and C very similar? Because really what you're doing, again, is what the controller secretary would have done. But maybe B and C will leave separate on that one. I guess I have a slightly different approach than the text, but I'm in the ballpark with them. Okay, 13-28. Next problem, page 433. Oh, 10 of these. A, B, C, D, E, oh my God, Bill. All right.
That's what I
well,
said, my table.
all right. There's only one after that. Let me see, what is the one after? Let me just take a quick look at the one after that.
That one is-
1434, I think I know which one that is. Oh, yeah.
That was,
Okay, that's real short. That's real short. That's just what order is which step done in. Because we only got 33 minutes or something. I have a feeling this is going to take up the rest of our time, but we'll see. We'll see. And that means we're only one chapter behind then, and we've already done some payroll work, so I'm feeling better. Okay. All right, here we go. This will be the big event. Then we have a small wrap-up. All right, 13-28. Following internal controls for the acquisition and payment cycle again. So we're getting a lot of advanced previews of that particular cycle, aren't we? Checks are mailed to the owner or manager or a person under her supervision after signing. Okay. The control activity, well, what do you think it is? Different people doing different things. Separation of duties. So A is separation of duties. I'll give you B, occurrence. The test of control is observe check mailing procedures. Observe check mailing procedures. The possible misstatement, if we don't have that, is a bookkeeper could take a signed check and change the payee name. A bookkeeper.
That's with C?
This is D.
D, okay.
C was observe the
Okay,
check
got it.
mailing procedures. This is D. There's A through E this time.
Mm.
Bookkeeper takes the signed check and changes the payee name. Let me comment on that a second. Do you ever notice if you send a check to the IRS now, the payee is now Department of the Treasury. It used to be IRS.
Mm-hmm.
But an IRS employee whose name was Smith, his initials were IR, Smith took a bunch of checks to the IRS, and when it said IRS, he put in IRS, he put down MITH after the S. Cashed the checks and then absconded. True story. So
They haven't
that's,
found him?
I think eventually they may have found him, but it was a significant amount. And so therefore it's no longer make the check payable to the IRS, it's Department of the Treasury, because nobody's going to have a name Department of the Treasury.
Right. So the bookkeeper takes the check and signs.
And changes the payee name from IRS to IR Smith. Substantive audit procedure for letter E, substantive audit procedure. Compare the payee name on the canceled check to supporting documents. Compare the payee name on supporting checks, compare the payee name on the canceled check to supporting documents. Compare payee name on canceled check to supporting documents. Okay, number 2, 1328. All supporting documents are canceled after checks are signed or electronic funds transfers are approved. What is A? What's 2A? Canceling documents.
Adequate documents.
That's it. Adequate documents or records, yes. B is occurrence. C is examine supporting documents. Examine supporting documents for indication of cancellation. In other words, you're looking at supporting documents to make sure they were canceled. The possible misstatement for D. basically making duplicate payments. That's like the one we had earlier, remember, duplicate payments for an acquisition.
So we just put duplicate.
Duplicate payments. No, it's like paying the same invoice twice. But again, we talked about that, and Barry had some additional data for us. And Part E, examine supporting documents for every payment. Examine supporting documents for every payment to selected vendors. Examine supporting documents for every payment to selected vendors. Let me just comment on that. You'd only do that on a sample basis, obviously. Examine supporting documents for every payment to selected vendors. Number 3, the authorized signer compares data on supporting documents with checks and electronic funds transfer authorizations. Independent checks on performance, in other words, it's an internal verification. Internal checks on performance for A. B, 2 items, occurrence and accuracy. Are we still on? Occurrence and accuracy. Now, what do you think they're going to have down for 3C?
Examine supporting documents.
Yeah, oh, well, no, that's one of the later ones. Examine vendor invoices for indication of comparison. In other words, you're looking for initials. You're looking for initials. You're looking for the initials, basically. D would be invalid or unauthorized payment. Invalid or unauthorized payment. Invalid or unauthorized payment. Now remember what you said, Letitia, for E, that's basically what you said earlier is E. Examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures. Examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures, which means basically for E, you're doing what they did internally. Four, this one's kind of hokey. Vendors' invoices are recalculated before payment. Okay, that's again for A, independent checks on performance. Independent checks on performance. What do you think is the transaction-related objective for B? Accuracy, yes. Accuracy, yes. The test of control is examine vendors' invoices for indication of recalculation. Examine vendors' invoices for indication of recalculation. D is, there could be a misstatement in the vendor's invoice. Do you think they'd be charging us more or less?
More.
More, of course! It's always in their favor. And for E, recalculate vendors' invoices. In other words, we do what supposedly was done internally on a sample basis. Recalculate vendors' invoices. Five, approved purchase orders are required for all acquisitions of goods. Proper authorization for A. B is occurrence. C, examine approved purchase orders for a sample of acquisitions. Examine approved purchase orders for a sample of acquisitions. What do you think D is? That they don't have this. What is D? Well, if somebody doesn't do a proper authorization, we could have unauthorized acquisition of goods. Unauthorized acquisition of goods. And E, not surprisingly, examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures. Examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures, which basically means that we're doing what the client did internally on a sample basis. Number 6, pre-numbered receiving reports are prepared as support for the acquisition and numerically accounted for. Adequate documents and records, Barry is correct. That's 6A. 6B is occurrence and completeness. Occurrence and completeness. C would be account for a numerical sequence of receiving reports. Account for a numerical sequence of receiving reports. D, unrecorded acquisitions exist. Unrecorded acquisitions exist. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about E. One thing I want you to think about starting next week and then the following week as well are confirmations. We already talked about the standard bank confirmation today. In a situation involving accounts receivable confirmations, which is not this part of the question, in accounts receivable confirmations, which are the receivables that you would want to confirm to make sure they're valid? Which ones would be most significant for you to confirm? Is accounts receivable likely to be understated or overstated? Oh, really?
Over.
I would say it's more likely to be overstated, overstating of assets. So you probably would want to confirm the largest accounts receivable. In the area of accounts payable, because now we're talking about acquisition and payment. In the area of accounts payable, are we more likely to overstate or understate liabilities?
Understate.
Understate. So which accounts payable would you be confirming?
Vendors with small balances.
Small balances, right. Or zero balances. So exactly, again, this is a preview of next week and the week afterwards. So for Part E, for number 6, confirm accounts payable, especially, exactly as Lena said, especially vendors with small or zero balances. Confirm accounts payable, especially those vendors with small or zero balances. You guys are picking this up pretty well. This is great. Number 7. Then we'll finish this up, and then we'll have our recessional hymn, which is short. Number 7. Dates on receiving reports are compared with vendors' invoices before entry is made in the acquisition journal. This is independent checks on performance for A. Independent checks on performance. B is one we haven't seen today. What is B? It's not occurrence or accuracy or completeness or anything like that. Timing or cutoff. Timing or cutoff. 7C. Examine vendors' invoices. Examine vendors' invoices for indication of comparison. That's like the initials again. Examine vendors' invoices for indication of comparison. D, cut off misstatements. Cut off misstatements. But E is one you would never think of, especially because this problem is in a chapter before the acquisition and payment chapter. Get ready for 7E. Perform the search for unrecorded liabilities. Perform the search for unrecorded liabilities. Bill, what is that going to be? Well, in week 7, when we talk about the acquisition and payments chapter, we'll be looking at the search for unrecorded liabilities. Part of it is the account payable zero balance or low balance confirmations. Number 8, the account payable master file is updated, balanced, and reconciled to the general ledger monthly. Independent checks on performance for A. Independent checks on performance. B is one we haven't seen today. I bet you forgot about this one. I did. Posting and summarization. Posting and summarization. Oh, she's out there.
What's going on?
She's out there again. Smoking again. Posting and summarization. C, examine for indication of reconciliation. Examine for indication of reconciliation of the master file and control account. I want to comment on that though. Examine indication of reconciliation of the master file and control account. Nowadays, that would be done through the computer. That will be part of the software, so you really don't have to initial off. 8D, misstatements in the master file or control account. There could be misstatements in the master file or control account. Misstatements in the master file or control account. Now, I'll give you E. They have what their E is, but then I'll comment. They have foot the subsidiary records and compared to the control account. They mean foot the account payable subsidiary records and compared to the control account. In real life, you won't have to do that. You'll check their software to make sure that anything I'm posting as some summarization is going to be done through software now, basically. All right, number 9. Account classifications are reviewed by someone other than the preparer. 9, what is A? No, actually that's B. 9 is independent checks on performance. Barry's right though, B is classification. So A is independent checks on performance, B is classification. You probably know C, examine vendor invoices. Examine vendor invoices for indication of internal verification. Examine vendor invoices for indication of internal verification. What's D? What type of misstatement? What was our objective?
The map, no, the,
Classification. So there could be classification misstatements. Classification misstatements. I want to comment on part E again. E, compare vendor invoices. Compare vendor invoices to the acquisitions journal. Compare vendor invoices to the acquisitions journal for reasonableness of account classification. I want you to get that all down. Let me repeat it. Compare vendor invoices to acquisitions journal for reasonableness of account classification. For reasonableness of account classification, I want to comment on that a second, because there's only one more and then the recessional hymn. One of the problems in the homework, and I think it's probably in the acquisition and payment chapter, indicates that the balances in one account, in the one expense account, seems inordinately large, whereas the balance in another expense account appears to be unusually small. Now that would be detected through horizontal or vertical analysis. What might that indicate? If one expense balance is extremely high and more than we would have expected based on our activity, and another one is extraordinarily low. Misclassification, exactly. And you'll see that on one of the homework problems. I think it's in that chapter 16. And that's why you do your horizontal vertical analysis, looking for unusual deviations. Number 10, the final one here, and then we'll go to our last one. All checks are signed by the owner or manager. A is proper authorization. B is occurrence. Of course, they're assuming manual signatures here. A lot of checks today are machine signed, but anyway. B is occurrence. C would be examine canceled checks for signature. Examine canceled checks for signature. D would be invalid or unauthorized payment. Invalid or authorized payment. Invalid or authorized, unauthorized payment. E would be examine supporting documents. Examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures. Examine supporting documents for appropriateness of expenditures. Now, I want you now, we have 10 minutes left. I want you to spend 5 minutes, and then we'll, on your own, then we'll go over it, looking at just one part of 13-34. It's the only part you have to put in the Dropbox. 13-34. It's part B. Part B. I'm going to also talk about Part C. They have 1 through 9. This is page 436. 436, 13-34. You're supposed to indicate at what point in the audit these would be done. July 31st is the year end. What would be done before July 31st? And then after July 31st, what would be done in what order? So you're just coming up with numbers. Like 532, 1468. All right, so I want you to try that on your own first. And then we'll talk about it as we kind of close up our experience today. I'm only one chapter behind, which is not bad. Plus, we did talk about payroll already today, so. My answer differs from theirs, by the way.
Of course, Bill.
That's it. So I'll give you both theirs and mine. You can, in the Dropbox, you can put either order, but, well, we'll do just theirs. We'll do just theirs.
Otherwise, you have to go to the CPA board and sit.
Oh, no, don't make me have to do the exam again. Oh, my
No,
God.
when I get it wrong, you have to.
Oh, my
You have
God.
to stand up for me.
When you complete the CPA exam and pass all the parts, you'll feel it's such an accomplishment. And you'll be so thankful you'll never have to do it again. What would be first, by the way, everyone? 5. 5.
Except the client.
What might be second?
Set acceptable audit risk.
Which is number 9, right?
Yeah.
Yes. 5 first, definitely. Then 9. What might be next?
7.
7. Excellent. Wow. 5, 9, 7. 2. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. 5, 9, 7, 2. Those are the ones they have before July 31st. And you got all of them. 5, 9, 7, 2. Now, afterwards, there probably could be a slightly different order, but anyway. Okay, what might be after the July 31st? What are 3 that would be afterwards, but not at the very end of the audit? Well, what are the last 2? What are the last 2?
Issue the audit report.
That's the last one, 6, and what's the one right before that? 6 should be last. What's the one right before it?
Confirm accounts payable.
No,
No.
that'll be earlier. It's chapter 24. which will
4.
be-
Do test for review.
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. That's exactly it. So 6 should be the last one. 4 is right before that. Because you'll see the subsequent period event test we go over in chapter 24, which is the completion of the audit. So 8, 1, and 3 could be, I think, in almost any order. So 5, 9, 7, 2, then we have year end. Then we have 8, 1, 3, or 3, 1, 8, or 1, 8, 3.
What do they want for the book?
They have 8, 1, 3.
Okay.
8, 1, 3.
813?
8, 1, 3, but you could do 1, 3, 8 or 3, 1, 8 or something. And then 4 and 6, of course, are last. 4 and 6.
Okay, so I had,
So 5, 9, oh, what did you have?
well, I had 1, 2, and no 1, 6. Mine was wrong.
Well, not necessarily, because if you look at part C, skip part A, if you look at part C, it says what could be done before year end. You say, well, 7 and 9, because we had them before year end. But they also list here, well, maybe not, I guess not. Okay, let's just go with 5, 9, 7, 2 before year end. But let's look at the 8, 1, 3. Confirm accounts payable, well, you know, and 8 was do analytical procedures. Maybe I would do that one before 1. I think I would do 8 before 1. What was 3? Do other tests for account balances. So I do think 8 would be first, but then either 1 or 3, or 3 or 1. So 5, 9, 7, 2, then 8, 1, 3, or 8, 3, 1, then 4, 6. And we have 2 minutes. Any other questions or ideas? Do you know what to put into the Dropbox? Okay. Is someone going to contact Amanda or something so she'll have access, or tell her about the recording?
So, chapter 10, we did 34 and 35, right?
Yes, in chapter 10, we just did those two problems, and that's all you have to put in there from 10, 34 and 35. And we did the 23, but one of them we didn't have to do the 22C, but we do the 12 and 24. And we did the chapter 12 you don't put in because we had a handout. You do those 3 for chapter 13. And that's it. Remember, for next week, don't do any problems or anything for 15 and 17, although one of those chapters did have an audit program. So if you see any audit programs in there, but we're not getting into all that in-depth statistical sampling, except in the online discussion. In the online discussion, I'll be bringing that up, but we're not testing that, and we're not going into all those different probabilistic, non-probabilistic sampling and all that, but we will for the online discussion. All right.
So wait, everything we did today goes in the Dropbox?
Yes.
And then was there anything else that we had to do on our own?
No, you mean like the 10-38 last time? No.
Okay.
But I'm just wondering if someone wants to email Amanda or something with this, or indicate to her the recording that was done, or whatever.
She has the
link or
she
something.
asked for it, so I know she has it.
Yeah, I'm surprised she's not here.
I'm sure it's something.
She emailed me yesterday to say how come she lost points on something. So I referred it to the answer.
Maybe you made her cry.
I might have hurt her. I hope not. Amanda, I did not mean to, but I'm worried that something may have happened with your daughter or something, so I hope everything's okay. Or maybe she's emailed me. She hadn't as of 12:30, because I was online then, but I'll be going back to my...
I'll send her my notes.
Okay, that will help too, thank you. And notice as we're getting things moving now, we're able to start thinking more about the course project.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
Well, yours will be in payroll and personnel for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. And we may count on you next week to provide some guidance, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in that.